till sight transforms into insight. Until you get there, you can't rest content. This is called shradha. And you must pursue it anasuyantaha, free from malice. You can't mock at it. You can't take it lightly. You can't, that's why we say you have to have a worshipful attitude towards it. You can't, most of us follow spirituality. Nowadays it's come to such an extent where first of all you start with questioning the bona fides of the person. He's reached the state of realization. We are in the state of limitation. No person who is in a state of limitation, bondage, can understand freedom. First of all, you can't understand that you're bound. Take for instance, a person who's under the influence of alcohol. If you tell him, look, don't drive the car because you're drunk, he can't understand it. He'll say, who says so? Of course I am okay, I'll drive. Most wives make the mistake of saying that and get into trouble. But he can't understand that he's bound. Similarly, you and I are bound. And you can't understand that you're bound. You can't understand what is the angle of vision, what is the perspective of a person who has reached moksha, liberation. That's why you need shradha. Shradha doesn't mean blind faith. Shradha means you make an analysis, make an assessment with your limited intellect, but understand that you have limitations. First of all, even with people at the same level, it's impossible to understand completely what makes the other person tick, what is the other person's attitude. So our business is not to come and question the bona fide. Our business is not to get involved with the personality. Our business is simply to take the knowledge. Take the knowledge. Never mind who or what that person is. Swami Ramatirtha says, follow the teachings, not the teacher. There's a world of difference between the two. We end up following the teacher and get into trouble. Because what can you follow? You can only follow the externals. The way he dresses, the way he speaks, by his mannerisms, all that is followed by the students. But his vision of the transcendental, his perspective of life, that you can't get by just imitating. So what is required is emulation, not imitation. You don't need clones of the teacher. You need followers, students. So anasuyantaha and shradha. Shradha is the positive, anasuyanta is the negative. You must be free from malice and you must follow it with shradha. Then you also will get freed from actions. Verse 32.
Ye tve tadabhyasuyantaha nanutishtanti me matam sarvajnana vimudhaustan vidhi nashtana chetasaha.
So what he's done here is, in verse 30, he's given the 6-point path to perfect action. In 31, he says those who follow it will reach the goal, will get freed from all actions. In 32, this verse, he says those who don't follow it will perish, are ruined. And he uses strong language here. Know them to be destroyed, who, deluded of all knowledge and without discrimination, decry my teaching and do not follow it. So he's stating a law here. If you're acting in the wrong spirit, if you're acting, as he says earlier, the world you can't succeed with non-yajna activities. The world is bound by non-yajna activities. So if you are not acting in the spirit of yajna, in the spirit of service and sacrifice, dedicating your actions to a higher ideal, whatever be that ideal, then you will neither be elsewhere, he says, na siddhim, you will not be successful, na sukham, you won't be happy, na param gatim, you won't reach that state of realization. You will be destroyed. So he is simply stating a law. What you need to understand is to live life, you must learn and practice this technique of living. It's not easy to live. Just because you're born in this world doesn't mean you automatically have the wherewithal of living. You have to learn it, you have to practice it. But most of us today don't seem to have time or the inclination for this technique of living. We're too busy chasing objects of the world right from a young age. Earlier it used to be after teenage years slowly this selfishness crept in or this materialism crept in. Now marketers are targeting children. So by the time a child is 5 years old, he's after some game or the other, some toy or the other, some PlayStation or the other. So this technique of living is not taught. We don't know it, we are not teaching it. For generations together, this technique of living has been lost, and therefore all of us are destroyed. You can see it happening, the gradual, now it's no longer gradual, it's a sharp decline in values, sharp decline in certain norms, and that's affecting all of us. So where do we start? Start with yourself. Upgrade yourself to a higher perspective, a higher vision, higher values. Establish yourself in the higher. Follow it, implement it, put it into practice. Fearlessly. Most of us don't follow values because they say, oh, what will happen to me? What will happen? Nothing will happen. The world must surrender to a person with character. You can see it. So, know them to be destroyed, who deluded of all knowledge, who don't know this knowledge, and therefore their intellect is not strengthened without discrimination. Decry my teaching. What? Totally senseless. Achetasaha, he says. Decry my teaching and do not follow it. Verse 33.
Sadrusham cheshtate svasyaha prakrute jnanavanapi prakrutim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati.
Even a knowledgeable person acts according to his or her own nature. Beings follow their nature. What can suppression achieve? Now here, with this verse, you feel discouraged. You say, if Krishna himself says beings follow their own nature, what can suppression achieve? Then what can you and I do? Give up the whole thing. Don't come tomorrow. That's not what he means. What he's saying is, which is very, very vital. It's a vital piece of advice to all genuine seekers of spirituality, of self-development, which is, don't expect instant result. You must understand that for years together, perhaps for janmas together, you have followed a certain pattern of activity and that groove has been formed. To get out of that groove, it will take a little bit of time. You can't say, oh, these 6 days I've attended Karma Yoga, 7th day onwards I must sprout wings and have a halo around my head. It can't happen. And if you expect that to happen, then you'll get discouraged and you'll give up the knowledge of the Gita. That's why, to protect you, to give you the right perspective, he says, even a knowledgeable person, even a wise person, acts according to his or her own nature. Then what about the rest of us? Beings follow their nature. Prakritim yanti bhutani. Nigraha kim karishyati. What can restraint do? What can suppression do? This is the other mistake that we make. In our enthusiasm to follow the spiritual path, when desires come up which are contrary to the spiritual path, we take the easy way out and sweep it under the carpet, suppress it. By not allowing the desire to manifest itself physically, all that you're doing is you're blocking. You remember the chronology of action. Vasana leads to thought, leads to desire, leads to action. All that you can do is stop at the action level. Prevent the desire from manifesting as action. That's the easiest thing to do, so you do that. But you're not dealing with the desire, you're not dealing with the thought, you're not dealing with the vasana. It'll get bottled up and come up later in a far more deadly, more distorted, more vicious manner. So, yet at the same time, if you allow it to flow, then you're a materialist, you're like anybody else. So what do you need to do? Change the focus of your attention, fix a higher ideal, get inspired with something higher, pursue that consistently, constantly. When your mind is on that, your mind doesn't stray into the lower desires. A desire which is not fed, which is starved, wanes away, fades away. After some time you say, oh, what happened to my desire? It's gone. That's a far more healthy way of going about it than suddenly suppressing desire. You can't do it, first of all. But at the same time, you must understand these higher aspirations are also a part of your psyche. Every one of us has higher aspirations. And you must give vent to that. You must identify it, you must understand that's also part of it. Why are we all here today? Nobody has forced us to come. We're here because deep down you have that spiritual urge. You have that mumukshatra. You must give vent to that. And please remember, the spiritual path is not a fad. It's not a fashion. It's not something that you follow just because a celebrity follows it. Today, the celebrity culture and fad culture has unfortunately seeped into the spiritual line also. You should do it because you feel committed to it. Never mind what anybody does or doesn't do. Don't choose a path just because millions are going there. The path must be chosen, the teaching must be chosen according to whether this particular form of presentation appeals to me or not. And then it doesn't matter if nobody else is pursuing it. It suits you, you take it. When you go to a doctor and he prescribes a medicine, you don't ask him, does Amitabh Bachchan take this medicine? And yet in the spiritual path you say, which celebrity is going, then I will also go. It's not a fad, it's not a fashion, it's an age-old science of living, which has come through the ages, tens of thousands of years, where our forefathers have, perhaps with great sacrifice, preserved that knowledge so that they may pass it on to us. And what are we doing? Frittering it away. If at all we take to it, is surface. You pick up enough knowledge, or what do they call it? To add value to your CV. What? I am also pursuing Vedanta. That's not what it's all about. It's about rebooting your mind and intellect. It's about re-energizing your personality with higher values. It's about adding value to your life. So, when you understand this, then you're not discouraged, whatever happens. Just as you go to a management school and get an MBA, does that mean you become a millionaire straight away? But if an MBA student expects that, the moment he gets the degree, graduates out of a management school, straight away he should become a millionaire. Whatever he does turns to gold immediately. No. It just gives him the knowledge which he now needs to apply in his life, and perhaps if he applies it properly, he will be a successful person. Similarly, the knowledge of the Gita is given, you take it, you have to reflect over it, you have to work with your personality, very carefully deal with your desires, channelize your desires properly, your energies properly. And maybe sometime, and not maybe, you will get out of it. As we said the other day, you pursue it sincerely for 1 year. And at the end of that 1 year, take stock of the situation. Then you will see an improvement. Every 15 days you want an improvement, it will never happen. Just as if a really gross overweight person goes on a diet and every 3 hours she weighs herself, do you think she's going to find a loss of weight? No. But if she continues that path, even if she doesn't weigh herself, there will be a gradual, consistent reduction of weight till after a few months it's perceptible. That's what he's saying. Even a knowledgeable person acts according to his or her own nature. You must understand that vasanas are a force and energy that cannot be just wished away. You have to deal with it. You have to change the course of that energy. Channelize it properly. So don't just restrain, don't just suppress. Get inspired with the higher, work at it consistently, you'll get there. Next verse, 34.
इन्द्रियस्येन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्न वशमागच्छेत् तौ ह्यस्य परिपन्थिनौ.
Attachment and aversion for the objects of the senses dwell in the sense organs. Nobody should be controlled by these two, one's enemies. Now, from now onwards, in a couple of verses, he describes raga, dvesha, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, desire as one's enemies. He uses the word paripanthina here. He uses 4 terms, all of which mean enemy. Paripanthina, vairinam, nitya vairinam and shatru. Who is the enemy? He uses deliberately, he uses psychology here. Who is he speaking to? He's speaking to a soldier, Arjuna, commander-in-chief of the Pandava forces, who's clued in, who's programmed to suddenly get alert the moment the word enemy is mentioned. So he uses the word enemy. Then he says, where is the enemy? Not out there, within you. Raga-dvesha. Desire is your greatest enemy. And what are you doing with this enemy? Pampering it, nurturing it, nourishing it, encouraging it. Raga, dvesha, attraction and repulsion. First of all, he tells us the like and dislike, attraction and repulsion, the value that you place on a certain enjoyment in the world, object of the world, lies not in the object, it lies in your sense organ. So when you like a particular thing, you give it black market value. When you don't like it, you devalue it. That's what's happening in us. So constantly you like something, you dislike something else. And these likes and dislikes, if you act on them, what happens is, it strengthens that particular like. And you avoid a thing only because you dislike it, again you're adding to that dislike. So this raga dvesha, which is already an enemy, which is already creating problem in your system. Using modern language, these likes and dislike desires are like a virus in a computer. It completely destroys your database. It finishes you off. The intellect is like antivirus software. It protects you from these viruses. The virus of like and dislike. At that time, the terminology that he used is enemy. You take whatever you like. But we must understand that these are our greatest enemies. Why? Because it destroys your peace of mind. It destroys your activity. It prevents you from performing successful, perfect actions. And it destroys you at the end. So why are you riding on this like and dislike? When he says this, Krishna doesn't mean that you should discard the like and dislikes. You can't discard it. Krishna is certainly not suggesting that if you don't like Karela, for instance, that you should have it at every meal. He's not saying that. And whatever you like, you should constantly chase it. He's only saying, when there is a like or a dislike that comes up in your mind, examine it. For instance, if you say, I like the Bhagavad Gita. Please don't say, oh, he says, Paripanthina, enemy, so tomorrow I will not come. Examine it. If your intellect says that it is perfectly in order for you to pursue it, to have it, by all means have it. But if the intellect says, watch out, this is a danger zone, then you must have the strength to follow the sane counsel of the intellect and override the like at that point in time. If you are unable to do this, then you get destroyed. That's all that he's meaning. So don't discard it, examine it. In Othello, Shakespeare says, this person called Cassio is given, the villain of the piece, Iago, gives Cassio alcohol and then he gets drunk. When he comes round to his senses, he looks at it and he says, O thou invisible spirit of wine, if thou hast no other name to call you, let us call thee devil. That's what it is. Devil. What? Not the object, the desire. Same principle. Attraction and repulsion towards sense objects reside in the sense organs. They're not out there. Nobody should be controlled by these two, one's enemies. Next verse. 35.
Shreyan svadharmo vigunaha paradharmat svanushthitat svadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha.
Svadharma, one's own duty, means one's area of core interest. Even if it is without merit, is better than paradharma, another's duty, well performed. It is better to die in svadharma, as paradharma is bhayavaha, frightful. In the previous verse in 34, which we've just done, he says, likes and dislikes are your greatest enemy, paripanthina. Don't come under their dominion. And here he says, svadharma, your nature, you should perform. There is an apparent contradiction here, because svadharma is again determined by your desires. One person has a desire for music, another person has a desire for mathematics, and a third person has a desire for sport. Svadharma is determined based on your strongest desire. So how is it in one verse he says, desire is your greatest enemy. Next verse he puts it categorically, emphatically, svadharma, it is better to die in the svadharma. What he means is, svadharma is the powerful trait in you, powerful inclination towards a particular field of activity. You must identify that and work in that area, work in your svadharma, dedicating your actions to a higher ideal. Then your vasanas get purified. You get purified of your vasanas and desires. Whereas if you choose an ideal field of activity that is alien to your nature, then it goes against the grain. So what you're doing is, your most powerful desire, you're not enabling that to get fulfilled or exhausted. And you're working in a field where you have no interest whatsoever. So choose a field of activity in accordance with your powerful desire. Having chosen it, work in that free from likes and dislikes. So say for instance, a musician chooses the field of music and is working in that field. On a particular day, he might not feel like practicing. He might not feel like performing. He shouldn't function on likes and dislikes within the area of the svadharma. There the intellect should drive him to activity. 36.
Arjuna uvacha atha kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha.
Arjuna uvacha, now after this brilliant presentation by Krishna, Arjuna has a question. And he says, "O Varshneya," Varshneya, he addresses Krishna as Varshneya because he's a descendant of the Vrishni clan. What drives a person to commit sin, even against one's wish, as if compelled by force? In these verses 36 to 39, he speaks of the obstacles to right action. Krishna has enunciated right action up to now. Arjuna's question is, I know what I ought to do. I know what is right and what is wrong. And all of us know that.